Right now on It's Gonna Be Fine, we have Gwyneth Paltrow suggesting arugula can be a substitute for dairy. Florida is turning on the people it once attracted. Luxury culture is seemingly everywhere, and somehow all of those things might actually be connected. Here we go. Hello and welcome to It's Gonna Be Fine. You know, a few episodes ago, we discussed how nothing is really off the record anymore. And we focused on that as something happening to us, thanks to technology, social media, cancel culture, and our own personal image. Today, I'd like to go deeper on this topic from somewhat of a different perspective. Yes, this did happen to us in a way, but how have we adapted? And are we okay? Because based on what's been going on lately, I don't know that we're okay. It seems like we're operating in a world that none of us were really prepared for, nor know exactly how to live in it. And sometimes it feels like we're floundering. So why do I feel this way? Well, it's like we're just not discreet anymore. And there are several examples of this. So many people who have wealth these days are not just living as wealthy people, they're flaunting it. We've got public figures like Gwyneth Paltrow saying things like arugula can be a substitute for dairy as if it's a totally normal thing to say. And the focus on external aesthetics and optimization is off the charts. And I promise I won't use the L word. If you know, you know. And things like cosmetic surgery are celebrated. So on the one hand, there's something kind of nice about this. For years, we've heard about living your truth, being your authentic self, and that is really important. But are we taking it too far? And have our filters completely gone away from our minds and straight to our Instagram posts? So let's start there with that authenticity movement. And let's explore how it all started, where it's taken us, and the many signs that really make me wonder what happens to human behavior when we experience life as always visible. So this culture of authenticity, I would say it started, I don't know, mid to end of the 2000s. I think prior to the turn of the century, you know, in the 90s, the 80s, even previous decades, there was definitely a culture of, you know, be humble, hide anything that makes you different. There wasn't the comfort with topics like sexuality as there is now. And around, you know, the mid to late 2000s, things started to change. We saw things like the No Hate campaign. I think that was like 2007, 2008. There was more representation on television for people from underrepresented groups or people who weren't quote unquote the norm. And that just continued to improve. And personally, that was a great time for me. That time period allowed me to have the confidence to come out of the closet and live an open and authentic life. I don't know. It's hard to know if that would have been possible for me in earlier decades. I know it was very hard for a lot of people. So there's some really great things about this. But did it go a bit too far? Have we taken it too far? Not that authenticity is bad, but are we going from one extreme to another? And maybe what we really need to do is live somewhere in that middle ground. Because somewhere along the way, authenticity stopped just being a personal value and kind of became a public performance. Again, not necessarily a bad thing. I think it just depends how you use it and how you perform that public performance. But there's this concept that maybe we became too authentic. And even now we're sharing things that we one time would have considered TMI. Of course, I'm thinking about, okay, what caused this? So there's a few reasons, and I don't think many of these will really surprise anyone. But of course, the first one is social media. We are sharing everything, right? Day in the life, get ready with me, GRWM. All of those trends and videos that we share. And I was chuckling when I was thinking about this because I remember, again, back to the mid to late 2000s when Twitter was becoming more popular and people who were not in my generation, so not millennials, but people a bit older, I vividly remember them saying, what's the point of this? Like, why are people like, it seems like people just use Twitter to show what they ate for dinner or the snack they had in the afternoon. I don't care, right? And obviously Twitter wasn't just for that, and it's become much bigger than that. But at the time, that was like the sentiment amongst the older generations. And here I am 20 years later, almost 20 years later, also being like, why do I care about your get ready with me or your day in the life? It doesn't mean anything to me. So it could be a generational thing. Another reason that I think some of this happened was COVID. During COVID, we were so isolated and craving attention that we maybe did things we wouldn't have done prior to COVID just to sort of get that attention. Things like OnlyFans, it existed prior to COVID, but it really blew up in COVID. It became more normal to either be on that site and share what you're sharing or subscribe to the site. If I think about dating norms as well, like all of a sudden now it is completely normal to send nudes, send dick pics, anything. I mean, sending nudes is as common as sending emojis these days. The internet, social media, boredom, COVID all blurred the lines between this public and private identity that maybe we once differentiated from a bit more. I mean, look at politics too. They've become so much more divisive over the years. We've seen increases in political violence, increases in public clashes during protests, wild statements being made from all sides. And it just seems like people don't have a problem sharing and being more aggressive than they ever were before. So now in this post-COVID share everything era, anytime there's a performance or you're trying to be more visible, then comes, I think, the optimization of that performance. And we kind of find ourselves in the optimization era of that. So how can we make our performance perfect? And how can we make money on it? So all of that starts happening as well. Like everything's got to be better, better, better. And it feels like a competition. Who can get more followers? Who can get the most views? Who can start a trend that blows up? Who can go viral? We're seeing things like health optimization, and there's all sorts of discussions about this. Some people who think it's great, and some people think it's like way overkill. Again, I'm not going to use the L word. We promised we wouldn't talk about that for a while. Cosmetic procedures, there's a place for them, absolutely, but it feels like it's become like a skincare routine at this point. I know plenty of people that get Botox all the time and spend a lot of money on it. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing that people do it and talk about it. Like that is probably a good thing that people discuss it and don't feel shame around it. But it's shifted from something that you may have done more privately in the past to something that's very public. Especially within social media, there's the push to make money and monetize everything. We're seeing such an increase in clickbait across everywhere, within politics, online, within, commerce, trying to sell things. Scams are off the charts. So it's really just come down to who can say or do the darndest thing and who can do it the best way and make the most money and get the most attention. And there are some other examples of this that I recently saw that I thought were pretty interesting and sort of speak to what we're talking about. The first one is something I saw, I think last week. It was the Islamic holiday of Eid al-Adha, which is the second major Islamic holiday of the year. And I saw a Instagram post from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, who posted a photo with the mayor of New York City. The mayor of New York City showed up in an Arsenal-themed thobe. A thobe is a traditional ankle-length robe primarily worn by men in the Middle East and North Africa. And so they're in this photo together, and her caption didn't say anything like, about the holiday, the meaning of it, or anything like that. It focused on his outfit And what she wrote was, she said, really exciting, celebrating Eid. And her main point was, I cracked up when the mayor, quote, rolled up in this fit. So for a post about a holiday, a pretty important and significant holiday, became about the fashion and not the holiday. And then, of course, there's the Gwyneth example, which I referenced. When I saw this, I was just like, whoa. And don't get me wrong, I am sure Gwyneth is a lovely person. I have enjoyed a lot of her work. If she ever wanted to be a guest on this show, I'd be doing a happy dance for days. And that's days with 4 Z's. And it's not even so much the comment she made about arugula being a substitute for dairy. It's just the complete absence of awareness of how absurd that sounds. In the clip, she does say, this is going to sound weird, but then she says it so confidently. Like, yeah, of course I'm substituting dairy with arugula. And yes, of course it gives that similar consistency. Here's the clip, in case you haven't heard it.
If you want to avoid dairy, one trick that I do is I dice up arugula and I put it in.
Really?
It sounds weird, but it kind of adds like a nice texture to it, and it's delicious.
Yeah, so that happened. And then, it goes deeper, though, than politicians and celebrities. We're seeing this in the economy. We're seeing this economy being referred to as the, quote, gaudy age. And the economy has sort of turned into this flaunting, performative economy. And there's a really strange contradiction in the economy right now, because life feels increasingly unaffordable for a huge number of people. We've seen gas prices off the charts, although I was on a bike ride this morning and they've gone down by like 30, 40 cents. So that was pretty great to see. Hopefully it continues. But yeah, life is increasingly unaffordable. Gas prices, groceries, all sorts of costs that people are facing with. But yet culturally, visible wealth feels more aggressive than ever. And there's data behind this. So the University of Michigan has a consumer sentiment index. And that consumer sentiment index just fell to its lowest level since the survey began in 1952. That says a lot, because there have been a lot of crazy economic things that have happened since 1952. If we think just most recently, COVID, of course, and the crash of 2008, the recession, the 2008-2009 recession. So the fact that consumer index is at its lowest level since 1952 is very, very telling. And according to the Conference Board Index, Conference Board Index is historically benchmarked at 100, and any reading below 100 typically signals increased pessimism amongst consumers. So the Conference Board Index remains stuck right now at 93.1. So it's under 100, the benchmark, and it's well below what it was prior to COVID, which was like the 130 plus range. And in addition to that, 2/3 of Americans are saying that they are cutting back on spending. So the economy's not great for a lot of people. Let's say at least 2/3 of Americans are really feeling it, and probably more. But we're also seeing wealth everywhere. Like, it's in our faces. I saw this article on LinkedIn, which discussed how we used to value this sort of minimalist approach to wealth, or even to aesthetics and what we were talking about. Don't be too showy, be humble, but if you have wealth, live with it, but like it wasn't as in your face. And now that has completely changed. We've got fashion, designer culture. We talked a few episodes about the Met Gala, which was oozing wealth, which caused some controversy where people were feeling, why are we showcasing this when, again, so many people are hurting financially? We've taken on this concept where personality and what we have and what it makes us look like is valued over restraint. Whereas in the past, maybe we would have restrained more to show our wealth. Now it's like, hey, if I have it, I'm going to flaunt it. Everything is all about loud expression. And then there's a really fascinating case about this, which is the state of Florida. So the Wall Street Journal covered this, I believe, last week. And Florida is such a great example of this shift in wealth and visible wealth, because Florida used to represent affordability, reinvention, and retirement, right? Like, I know tons of people who during COVID moved from more expensive states to Florida to live a more affordable life and a more affordable lifestyle, and just to them, a better lifestyle. For years and years and years, Florida has been a destination for snowbirds and retirees. And now it is shifting and it's becoming this ode to visible wealth. And in fact, so many wealthy people are going there and living their wealthy lifestyles in the state of Florida, specifically mostly in Miami, at least according to the Journal. It's driving out those people that once appreciated it for its affordability. So again, let's look at the data. The population growth to Florida has slowed. So I think we saw a lot of people going there over the last few years. That has slowed down. And the people that are moving there now are wealthy people. It's not really the people looking for more affordability. Miami specifically has been reported to have the highest concentration of millionaires than any other city in the country. The CEO of Citadel, Ken Griffin, recently moved his company there to Florida, I believe in the Miami area. And someone like Mark Zuckerberg built a mansion there in this area referred to as, quote, billionaire bunker. So the point isn't just that wealth increased, it's that wealth is becoming a performance and visible within, big CEOs like Zuckerberg and Griffin, but also online with people who may or may not actually be wealthy, but they're making it seem like they are, specifically within social media and quote unquote influencers and creators. And it's really highlighted this K-shape economy, which we seem to be living in. And this K-shape economy tends to also exacerbate visibility. So really quickly, the K-shape economy, basically imagine the letter K. And so K has, the foundation of the long line, and then there's the two branches, the top one and the bottom one. In a K-shaped economy, some people go up the top arm of the K. Their income rises, their investments do better, their home values are going up, and their businesses are doing very, very well. So they are experiencing that wealth. And then other people go down to the bottom arm of the K, where they face much higher costs, more financial pressure, and a lot less economic security. So instead of everyone rising and falling together, where it's like, hey, the economy is doing well and we're all benefiting from it, people's experiences of the economy are dramatically different in this K-shaped economy. And honestly, I think that's why conversations about the economy have become so confusing, because two people can look at the same economy and come to very, very different conclusions. One person might see packed restaurants, luxury apartments, and record wealth. And another person is seeing rising rents, rising insurance costs, groceries more expensive, crazy gas prices. And they're both telling the truth. They both are experiencing these things. They're just living on different arms of the K. And perhaps this wider gap between those two, trying to do K, between those two branches also makes and helps make that wealthy part more visible. So what else might be contributing to this visibility and performance that we're seeing in the economy when it comes to wealth, when it comes to what people are just saying out loud? And it seems as if we're reacting to this world we live in some drastic ways. And maybe that's because we are. And I wonder if it's due to this effect of constant documentation. The world we live in, where everything is filmed, can be filmed, recorded, documented, saved, and kept forever. So think about it. I mean, for most of human history, there was a meaningful difference between public life and private life. You could have an embarrassing moment, it would disappear because it wasn't filmed, it wasn't recorded, it wasn't put on social media. You can have conversations with people, they disappeared. They happened and then they were gone. And if anything, you had he said, she said, but no proof. The things that you didn't necessarily stick with you forever. But that's not the case anymore. Now, with everything being filmed, it's a lot different. And I don't just want to focus on the negatives of that, because there are some positives, of course. So we have very advanced security systems now, thanks to that. That helps individuals, businesses, people in general, society. Big cities are just planted with security devices. It helps, law enforcement. But also it can go, this idea of constant recording can go too far. Everything's recorded, archived, shared, reposted, and lives on forever. And honestly, I wonder if some people subconsciously adapted to that by just giving up on privacy because it's gone. So maybe we've reached a point where people thought, hey, if everything can and might become public anyway, fuck it, I'm going all out. Which to me is a reaction to our current societal norms. And it makes me wonder if we weren't meant to live this publicly. We hear all the time about modern society not being, or even just things we do, not being the way humans were meant to live. So, when we think about like the food we eat and how we weren't built to eat all this processed food, or, how we evolved to seek out threats and to notice threats as humans. And that was a survival instinct. But now that has turned into tons of anxiety that people deal with. We are living in a time where we haven't figured out how to live when everything is so public. And a lot of this is maybe a reaction. I compare it to, think about a kid who's reacting to some bad news. They want to get ice cream. Their parents say no, they have a meltdown. Anything like that. And so, of course, it's on a much bigger scale. But maybe that's what's happening is we're just like, all right, we're facing this world and like, how do we deal with this? And whenever there's a reaction, a lot of times it's just that, it's a reaction and it's not a decisive, intentional behavior. So that's kind of where I landed with some of this. Of course, curious to hear your thoughts as always. But we're not going to just wrap up right there because I would like to wrap up with something related, but also fun, so we can lighten it up a bit. We always like to end on a little bit of a lighter note. And it's so funny how all this comes together because I saw this article about The Devil Wears Prada 2. Probably familiar with that is. I actually haven't seen the movie yet, which is not good. I need to see it and I really want to see it. However, I will say based on the previews, it doesn't look that good. So I'll hold my judgment until I actually see it. But I remember seeing those previews being like, what actually happens in this movie? But anyway, this article about Devil Wears Prada 2 was all about the inflation, so related to the economy of things in the movie, what it cost in 2006 when it first came out to what it costs now, and how absurdly expensive all the fashion would cost today, thanks to inflation. And I was like, this is like the perfect time capsule for this entire conversation, because in 2006, the Miranda Priestly world was like this elite fashion fantasy. It was like, wow, look at this world that they live in. And fast forward 20 years in 2026, I feel like there's a lot more access to that aesthetic and status because that world has really leaked into influencer culture, Instagram, wellness culture, and everyday aspirational culture. I mean, we talked about how people are flaunting things like fashion and, personality and beauty and everything. And so it just feels like that's a lot closer to us now than it was in 2006 when that movie first came out. I mean, there's more access to everything these days because of social media. I mean, you could DM celebrities. Maybe I'll DM Gwyneth. But let's take a look at how inflation has changed over the last 20 years, shall we? So this is from The Cut. So let's start with Miranda Priestly's Prada tote bag. So in 2006, that cost $1,445. For a similar Prada bag today, $5,300 20 years later. That is a 266.78% increase in 20 years. One issue of Vogue in 2006, $3.99. In today's times, one issue of Vogue, $10, more than double. The annual salary as someone like Anna Wintour's assistant in 2006, it was like $32,500. This is according, I think, to the person who wrote The Devil Wears Prada, the novel, who I think was her assistant. And apparently by 2019, it had only gone up in 13 years to $35,000. And then according to a 2023 job listing, that position was listed at $60,000 to $80,000 a year. So All the products are going up really high, hundreds of percentage points. The salary, not so much. Let's see what else. So a tall, no foam skim Starbucks latte with an extra shot, $3 in 2006. Today, $6.50. Andy's first pair of Jimmy Choo slingbacks, 2006, $645. Today, $850. Let's see what else. The Chanel jacket of the season. Ooh. 2006, $5,665. And then for a similar style today, 20 years later, not as high as I would have expected, jumped to $6,700. So about $1,000 more. And then those thigh-high Chanel boots, $1,500 in 2006, $4,154.58 today if you were to buy them vintage on First Dibs. And then let's look at some food. Miranda's steak lunch from Smith & Wollensky in 2006, $50. Today, about $82. So overall, significantly more expensive, as we would expect. But some of these are really, really high. And just kind of fun to compare this to what the world was like 20 years ago. So I will be honest with you. I felt unusually connected to this episode while putting it together because I tend to have emotional reactions to the way the world around us keeps changing. I don't do great with change, and I tend to be very nostalgic, and I hold on to things. So all of this change and how we're reacting to it and what it might be doing to us as a society and what it means for the future gets me a little nervous, sometimes sad. So I do want to stay positive, but it's not easy. But what's actually funny about this episode is that when I was putting it together, it isn't exactly what I thought it would be when I started. It really actually just started about an episode about the economy. I was just going to kind of talk about that K-shaped economy and, some of the Florida stuff and what that means. But then from the economy, it sort of then became an episode about wealth. And then it became an episode about visibility. And then it became an episode about human behavior. And somewhere along the way, I kind of realized the point wasn't about any one of those things individually. And rather, it was about how we're adapting to the world that we've found ourselves in. So that brings us to, okay, what now? Do we have to fix this? Are we doomed? Is it just going to get more and more extreme? And look, there's probably lots of factors contributing to this. We talked about the K-shaped economy that we find ourselves in. AI is leading to some benefits, but also a lot of fear and uncertainty. So is the answer that we should retreat? Should we go back? Should we stop innovating with technology? I don't think so. Like when have we ever done that? When have we ever said, let's not innovate or let's go back to the way things were? I guess from time to time on a much smaller scale. But in terms of society, not really so much. And let's be honest, there's a lot of people, maybe not a lot, there's some people that stand to make lots of money on these technological advancements and AI, and they will pursue that with everything they have. So I don't know that we're going to be able to put a stop to it. And let's also remember there is some good with this. A lot of the openness and self-expression of modern culture has genuinely helped people. And as we've been discussing, and this is my opinion, that maybe this is just a reaction, the way we'd react to any major change, to decades of repression, to technology progressing at the speed of light. And all adjustments take time. And perhaps we'll move into a phase where we try to figure out whether every thought, insecurity, transformation, luxury purchase, political opinion, and emotional reaction actually benefits from being public. So I think right now we're not at that place and we're just sort of dealing with it and figuring it out. But maybe we will get to that stage where we are more intentional and decide if this is really how we want to live, portray ourselves, and how we want to be in the world. I am hopeful that as a society, we will transition into that reflection stage. And if we can do that, it will hopefully be fine. We'll see you next time.